My mom promised she wouldn't miss my graduation, but when my name was called, her seat was empty. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. That day was supposed to be the best day of my life. I worked hard for years, stayed up late studying, and did everything I could to make my mom proud. When I put on my graduation gown that morning, I was nervous but excited. I kept looking at my phone, waiting for her message saying she was on her way. She had promised me over and over again that she wouldn't miss it this time. As I walked into the crowded auditorium, I scanned the seats, searching for her face. Every row was filled with cheering parents waving cameras and flowers. I had saved a seat for her, front row, right beside my best friend Tessa's family. But that seat stayed empty. The ceremony started, and when my name was called, my heart sank. I smiled for the pictures, but it felt fake. My classmates ran into their parents' arms afterward, crying and laughing. I just stood there, clutching my diploma and staring at that one empty chair. Later that evening, I found out where she was. My mom had gone to my stepsister Kennedy's gymnastics showcase. It wasn't even a competition, just a small performance. Kennedy wasn't winning anything, she just wanted attention, and as always, my mom gave it to her. When I called her, my mom said she was so sorry, and that she couldn't be in two places at once. But it wasn't the first time. She always chose Kennedy. Ever since she married Rick, everything changed. Kennedy got the bigger bedroom, the newest clothes, the most attention. My mom kept telling me, she's still adjusting. Be patient. But how long was I supposed to be patient? I tried so hard to be understanding. I helped with chores, I studied hard. I kept quiet when they ignored me. But sitting alone at my own graduation broke something inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the feeling that I no longer had a place in my own family. That night, Tessa's mom hugged me like I was her own daughter. I cried quietly in the car on the way home. When I walked into the house, Kennedy was showing off her medal, a participation award. My mom smiled at her proudly and didn't even notice my cap still in my hand. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed for a long time. For the first time, I stopped hoping she'd change. That day, I realized she had chosen who mattered more to her. And it wasn't me. After the divorce, everything in my life changed faster than I could understand. Mom met Rick a few months later, and soon they were married. I didn't mind at first. I thought maybe she'd finally be happy again, and maybe I'd get a family that actually felt whole. But the moment his daughter Kennedy moved in, I realized I was wrong. Kennedy was the kind of girl who knew how to get what she wanted without asking twice. She smiled sweetly in front of adults, but rolled her eyes the moment their backs were turned. When we moved into Rick's house, Mom said we'd all share things equally, but that promise didn't last long. Kennedy picked the biggest bedroom, the one with the balcony. I was left with the smaller one at the end of the hallway, right beside the laundry room. Mom said, "Let's just give her time to adjust, honey. She's been through a lot." That sentence became her excuse for everything that followed. Every week, Kennedy got something new: clothes, shoes, even a puppy she lost interest in after 2 weeks. Mom and Rick acted like it was normal. When I asked why I couldn't have the same, Mom told me, "You're older, Alex. You should understand." I did understand. I understood that I was no longer her priority. I tried not to complain. I studied hard, hoping that maybe if I made her proud, things would change. I kept my grades perfect, joined the debate team, and even tutored Kennedy when she struggled with math. Every time I did something right, I waited for Mom to notice, but she barely looked up. She was always busy helping Kennedy practice her routines, attending her events, or taking her shopping. I told myself it wasn't jealousy. I just wanted a little of the same love I used to get. One evening, I overheard Mom telling Rick how lucky they were to have such a sweet little girl like Kennedy. My stomach dropped. It was like she had forgotten I was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding my report card with an A printed across the top. She didn't even ask to see it. I slipped it into my backpack and went upstairs without saying a word. Time kept passing, but nothing changed. Every small act of kindness I tried, every attempt to connect, went unnoticed. Kennedy learned she could do no wrong. If she messed up, it was forgiven instantly. If I made a mistake, it turned into a lecture about being mature. It hurt more than I liked to admit, watching my mom laugh at Kennedy's stories while barely remembering to ask about my day. I used to think that love was something you could earn by being good enough. But living in that house taught me otherwise. Some people just don't want to see you, no matter how hard you try to shine. The ceremony felt endless, though everyone around me seemed caught in a wave of celebration. I kept glancing at the empty seat in the front row, the one I'd marked with a small note that said Mom. I thought maybe she'd walk in late, out of breath, apologizing with that nervous smile she always gave when she messed up. But as name after name echoed through the auditorium, my chest grew tighter. When my turn came, I stood and walked to the stage, pretending I didn't notice the missing face in the crowd. The applause sounded hollow, like clapping in a dream. I took my diploma, smiled for the photo, and went back to my seat. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the folder. I checked my phone again and again. No call, no text, not even a message saying she was proud of me. After the ceremony, families rushed onto the field, flowers in hand, laughter filling the air. Tessa's parents hugged her tightly, and she turned to me with a look that said she understood more than words could. She asked if I wanted to come with them for dinner, but I told her I'd be fine. I didn't want anyone to see how hollow I felt inside. On the walk home, the streets were quiet. My gown fluttered in the wind, the edges catching bits of dust from the pavement. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was something colder. When I finally reached home, I opened the door to the sound of laughter. Kennedy's voice was loud, filled with excitement. Rick was taking pictures of her holding a bouquet of pink roses. My mom stood beside them, smiling like she was watching something beautiful. I froze in the doorway, still holding my diploma. They didn't even notice me at first. The living room was decorated with balloons that said Family Day. I stared at them, not sure whether to laugh or scream. My mom turned and said, "Oh, Alara, you're home. How was it?" Her tone was casual, like I'd just come back from school, not my graduation. I didn't answer. My throat felt tight. She went back to talking about Kennedy's big day, showing pictures on her phone. I caught a glimpse of one, the three of them smiling together, my mom holding flowers that were never meant for me. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the phone again. Still no message, still no apology. I thought about the empty chair, the silence when my name was called, the way she laughed with them like nothing had happened. Tessa texted me, "You okay?" I stared at the words for a long time before replying, "Yeah, I'm done trying." And I meant it. That was the moment something inside me shut off for good. If they couldn't show up for me, I decided I'd never show up for them again. Summer arrived heavy and airless, the kind of heat that makes even breathing feel like effort. The house buzzed with the sound of the ceiling fan and Kennedy's laughter drifting from the backyard. I spent most of my days inside my room, curtains drawn, the world outside muffled. No one mentioned the graduation, not once. It was as if that day had been erased from memory. One morning, Mom knocked on my door, her voice soft and practiced. "Alara, can we talk?" she said, stepping halfway in before I answered. She stood there with that uneasy smile, saying she was sorry for missing the ceremony, but that Kennedy's event was important too. The words slid out of her mouth like a rehearsed excuse. I nodded, pretending to listen, pretending it didn't sting all over again. Rick chimed in later that evening, while flipping burgers on the grill. "You're still upset about that?" he asked, shaking his head. "You've got to stop being so dramatic, kid. Life's full of disappointments." His tone made it clear that I was the problem. Not their absence, not their priorities, just me. I didn't argue. I didn't trust my voice not to break. From then on, I gave them exactly what they gave me. Polite words, empty smiles, nothing more. I stopped waiting for their approval, stopped hoping they'd see me. I ate dinner when they weren't around, spent afternoons at the library, stayed out late just to avoid the noise of their happiness. Kennedy kept boasting about her next performance, and Mom beamed like she was watching her own reflection shine. I learned how to disappear without leaving. Every time they asked how I was, I gave short answers. Fine, busy, tired. The truth was I'd grown numb. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. They had chosen their world, and I no longer belonged in it. Some nights, I sat on the porch long after everyone went to bed. The air smelled like cut grass and distant rain, and I'd think about the life waiting beyond that town. I started collecting brochures from colleges, reading about scholarships, picturing myself somewhere far away, a place where my name meant something, where no one compared me to someone else's daughter. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. I didn't need shouting or tears. I wanted them to see what silence looked like when it was aimed back at them. So I smiled when expected, helped with chores when asked, and slowly built walls so high they couldn't see through. By the end of summer, they had stopped noticing my quietness altogether. To them, I was just being moody. To me, I was learning how to live without their approval. The day I realized they mistook distance for peace, I knew I was finally free enough to start planning the next step, leaving. Not out of hate, but because they no longer deserved a place in my story. The envelope came on a humid afternoon, tucked between bills and flyers. I almost missed it until I saw my name printed in bold letters. My hands trembled as I opened it, reading the words that didn't feel real at first. A full scholarship to a university 3 states away. Tuition, housing, everything covered. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the letter while the sound of laughter floated in from the living room. Kennedy was showing Mom a new outfit she'd bought for another event. No one noticed me standing in the doorway with my future in my hand. That night, I went to my room and read the letter again under the yellow glow of my desk lamp. I thought about telling Mom, imagined her proud smile, maybe even a hug. But then I remembered her empty seat, her easy excuses, her silence when I needed her most. The excitement dimmed into something colder, quiet satisfaction. This was mine, my achievement, my escape. I decided right then that they didn't deserve to share in it. Over dinner the next day, Rick asked if I'd found a summer job yet. Mom added, "You could help at the community center until you decide what to do next year." I smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, I'll think about it." They assumed I'd stay close, maybe take classes at the local college. I didn't correct them. It was easier to let them believe the lie. In the weeks that followed, I prepared quietly. I filled out the housing forms, accepted the offer, and arranged everything through email while pretending to scroll through social media. At home, I acted normal, set the table, did the dishes, laughed when it was expected. But every night, when the house fell silent, I packed small pieces of my life into a duffel bag under the bed. The day of the award ceremony came, and Mom didn't even mention it. She was busy helping Kennedy practice for another showcase. I went alone. When I stood on the stage, holding the certificate and shaking the dean's hand, I felt something powerful rise in me. Not pride, but relief. For the first time, I knew I could walk away and never look back. That evening, I came home and slipped the certificate into my drawer. I didn't need them to see it. Let them think I was ordinary, unremarkable. The less they expected from me, the easier it would be to disappear. By the end of July, everything was ready. My acceptance letter was folded neatly in my backpack, my bus ticket hidden behind my bookshelf. I wasn't planning a dramatic goodbye, no confrontations or shouting. Just a note, short and calm, left on the kitchen counter. A thank you for the roof over my head and a reminder of what they had chosen to ignore. When I walked out that door, it would be for good. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. At least that's what Mom said when she called me downstairs. The table was already set when I walked in. Candles lit, plates arranged perfectly, and a cake with Kennedy's name piped across the top in pink frosting. The air smelled like garlic and something sweet, but underneath it all was that same thick silence that had filled our house all summer. Kennedy was glowing, sitting at the head of the table with her latest medal hanging around her neck. Rick poured himself a drink and raised his glass, bragging about her dedication and focus. Mom smiled like it was the proudest night of her life. I took my seat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. Dinner began with the usual small talk. Kennedy talked about her next competition, and Mom nodded along, completely caught up in her work. When she finally turned to me, her tone was polite but distant. "You've been quiet lately, sweetheart. Everything okay?" she asked, as if she hadn't noticed the months of silence between us. I looked up from my plate. "I'm fine," I said evenly. She frowned, tilting her head. "You've seemed different," she added. Rick chuckled and said, "She's probably still sulking about graduation. Kids take everything so seriously." Kennedy laughed under her breath, twirling her fork. Something inside me snapped, not in anger but in clarity. I set my fork down and looked straight at my mother. "You want to know why I've been distant?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. The table went still. Even Kennedy stopped smirking. "Because when I walked across that stage," I said slowly, "I realized I didn't have a mom in the audience. I had a stranger who traded me for someone else's applause." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one spoke. Mom's face froze, not in shock, but in guilt she didn't want to show. Rick's chair creaked as he leaned back. "That's enough," he said sharply. "Don't disrespect your mother like that." I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on her. Kennedy rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath, but I ignored her too. I'd spent too long being quiet, letting them twist the story. Tonight, I wanted my truth on the table with the rest of the dishes. Mom opened her mouth as if to explain, but no words came out. She just stared at me, her expression somewhere between shame and confusion. I waited, half expecting her to defend herself, half hoping she wouldn't. Finally, she looked down at her plate, silent. The sound of the clock ticking filled the space between us. I took a slow breath, stood up, and said softly, "Enjoy your dinner." As I walked away, I didn't slam my chair or raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet I left behind said everything I couldn't. The house was quiet when I came back downstairs. The dishes from dinner were still in the sink, bits of frosting smeared on the counter where Kennedy had cut her cake. The lights were low, only the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I moved carefully, like I didn't want the walls to notice me. My bag was already packed, sitting by the door, the straps worn from weeks of waiting. I sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of paper and a pen. The words came slowly at first, shaky lines that turned steady once I stopped second-guessing myself. I didn't want anger to fill the page. I wanted truth. I began simply, "Thank you." I wrote that they had taught me something valuable, though not in the way they intended. They showed me how it feels to be invisible, how to exist in a room where love has conditions. I told them that because of that, I now understood what real care should look like, the kind that stays, that shows up, that listens. I didn't write to make them feel guilty. I wanted them to read my words and understand the weight of what they'd done without me spelling out every wound. I mentioned the move, the scholarship, the distance I had chosen for myself. I told them I was leaving for university out of state, that I wouldn't be coming back soon. The next part took me the longest to write. I told my mother she could reach out someday, but only if she was ready to admit what she had done. Not to excuse it, not to pretend it never happened, but to truly see me for the first time. Until then, silence would be my answer. When I finished, I read the letter once more. It was calm, almost too calm, each sentence measured and final. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter beside the half-eaten cake. My name sat at the top, written in small, careful letters, Alara. I took one last look around the kitchen. The photos on the wall showed a family that never really existed. Everyone smiling, pretending everything was perfect. I wondered if Mom would notice the missing bag before she saw the letter. Probably not. I slipped my keys onto the hook by the door and took a slow breath. The night air outside smelled like rain. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me without a sound. For the first time, I didn't feel scared or guilty. Just free. Somewhere inside, the clock ticked past midnight. I pictured her finding the letter in the morning, reading it while Kennedy chattered about her plans, and finally realizing what had been slipping away all along. The daughter who had stopped waiting for her to choose. The first months away felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. My dorm room was small, but it was mine. No echoes of slammed doors, no forced smiles over dinner. Just quiet mornings, fresh air through the open window, and people who saw me without comparing me to anyone else. I learned to wake up without tension in my chest. I studied late, laughed easily, and let the calm settle into my bone. My roommate, June, was the kind of person who filled a space with warmth. She didn't ask about my past. She just accepted that I was starting over. We explored the campus, drank cheap coffee, and watched the sunset from the library steps. It felt good to belong somewhere that didn't demand anything from me. For the first time, I didn't have to fight for space. Then one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Mom. The screen lit up again and again until I turned it face down. When the calls stopped, a voicemail appeared. Her voice trembled through the speaker, full of practiced guilt. Alara, I don't know why you're doing this. Family is family. You can't just walk away. I listened once, then deleted it. A few days later, a text from Rick followed. Short. Cold. You broke your mother's heart. I stared at the words until they blurred. For a moment, I almost felt the pull to answer, to explain. But I didn't know them anything. I knew the truth. The heart they were talking about had cracked long before I left, and I hadn't been the one holding the hammer. Life moved on without their noise. I joined a study group, got a job at a cafe, and started saving money. Sometimes, when I passed families visiting campus, I'd feel a small ache in my chest, but it faded quickly. Missing something doesn't mean you want it back. On quiet nights, I'd walk across the bridge behind the dorms, the water below glittering under the streetlight. I'd think about that kitchen, that letter, the silence that followed. I wondered if she ever read it twice, if she ever really understood it. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. Her number stayed saved, though I never touched it. I left it there like an old scar, a reminder, not a wound. Every time I saw it flash across the screen, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. The world beyond that house kept growing wider. My laughter didn't sound forced anymore. My smile wasn't something I had to earn. And each morning I woke up knowing one simple truth. I hadn't broken anything. I had only stepped out of the ruins they built. 2 years had passed since I walked away, and the distance between us had turned into something solid and unshakable. My days were full, lectures, part-time work, friends who felt like family. I didn't think about that house anymore, not until my phone buzzed late one evening with a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Mom. For a while, I just stared at it. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity made me swipe to answer. Her voice came through thin and uncertain, nothing like the confident tone I grew up hearing. Alara, she said softly, I hope you're doing okay. There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long. Then she sighed. I really need to talk to you about Kennedy. Her words tumbled out fast. Kennedy had been caught bullying a younger teammate, something cruel enough to get her suspended from the gymnastics program. On top of that, a teacher had caught her cheating during an exam, and now the school was considering expulsion. She's falling apart, Mom said. She won't talk to me, she won't eat, she just stays in her room. I don't know how to reach her. I listened without saying a word. Her voice shook, but it wasn't the trembling of fear for her daughter. It was guilt. She wanted me to fix what she had broken, to be the stable one again. I could almost picture her sitting at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd left my letter, holding her phone like a lifeline. She kept talking, trying to sound hopeful. You've always been so level-headed. Maybe if she heard from you, she'd listen. I let the silence linger before answering. What do you want me to say to her? Just something, she whispered. You were always good at making people feel better. That made me smile, but not in the way she hoped. I thought about all the times I needed comfort and got nothing. All the nights she looked right through me while praising Kennedy's smallest victory. The irony was sharp enough to taste. I don't think I can help her, I said finally. She'll have to figure it out herself. Her breath hitched, and for a second, I heard the crack in her voice. Elara, please. I hope she learns something from this, I interrupted gently. I really do. She didn't reply. The quiet between us felt heavy, like the end of a long story that had finally run out of words. When the call ended, I sat for a while, staring at the city lights outside my window. I didn't feel triumph or pity, just understanding. The balance had shifted without effort. The girl they once ignored had become the one holding all the calm. That night, I slept without dreams, knowing they were finally the ones left waiting for an answer that wouldn't come. The drive back felt strangely calm. The old car hummed beneath me, the same one Rick had given me before I left. A hand-me-down I'd kept running through college with borrowed tools and online tutorial. Now, after 2 years of using it to build a life that had nothing to do with them, I was ready to give it back. The roads looked smaller than I remembered, the town quieter, the air heavier with memories I didn't want. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered on automatically, just like it always had. For a moment, I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, letting the engine idle before turning it off. The sound of the motor fading away felt like a closing chapter. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked older, not in years, but in the way people do when regret settles in. Her smile trembled, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to show it. You didn't have to come all this way, she said softly. I needed to return the car, I replied. My voice sounded steady, almost too calm. We stood in the entryway for a moment, the silence stretching between us. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and a hint of something floral. On the wall, the old photos were still there, frozen smiles from years I didn't want to revisit. I've kept up with you, she said, trying to fill the quiet. Rick told me you're doing well. I'm proud of you, Elara. Her voice wavered on my name. I nodded, not sure what to say. She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. I think about that day, she whispered. Your graduation. I should have been there. I wish I could take it back. For a long moment, I just looked at her. All the versions of myself, the child who waited, the teenager who hoped, the girl who left, felt like they were standing beside me, all silent. When I finally spoke, my words came out quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the space between us. You can't show up to my life halfway through the ceremony and expect me to wait for you. Her face crumpled and she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, she said softly. I know. I didn't stay to comfort her. There was nothing left to mend. I set the car keys on the table and walked toward the door. She called my name once, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the air was cool and still. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like starting over. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No anger, no final words. Just closure. As I walked down the driveway, I realized my revenge had never been about payback. It was this peace, independence, and a life that no longer revolved around waiting for her to choose me. My success spoke louder than any apology ever could. Hey besties. Thanks for staying till the end of this emotional story. Imagine your mom missing your graduation to cheer for your stepsister instead. Heartbreaking, right? But sometimes the people who hurt us most teach us how strong we can be on our own. If you felt this story, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time. Bye.